Thanks for being here. Subscribe to Cheating Stories Best, so you don't miss new stories.
The wife drove to work and her husband decided to drop off something she forgot, and that's when he saw this. Today's story has a similar plot. Enjoy watching it. It was a typical Sunday morning, and I was right on schedule. A typical fall Sunday morning was as close to heaven as could be. My schedule was almost set in stone. I got up and went for a run. Running in the fall is completely different. First of all, the air, although colder, is fresher and cleaner. The fall scenery in Michigan is stunning. All kinds of trees suddenly burst into a galaxy of shades and colors that are dizzying in intensity and unsurpassed in their beauty. Tourists from all over the country come to enjoy the fall colors and see the beauty of these leaves, and I got to ignore it and trample all these leaves for free. Maybe after 50 years, I have become immune to the beauty of it all, or maybe I was just an angry, lonely old man who was too introverted to enjoy it. Either way, the fall runs were a time for reflection. With no races to train for, I could just run quietly and let my mood, my thoughts, and the music on my iPod dictate the pace. After my run, I went home for a hearty breakfast and a few chores. Usually, these tasks involved checking my Mustang, which was nestled in its heated garage under a car cover. God, how I love this car. Anyway, after that, I spent the day with football and NASCAR on my 72-inch TV. I showered and had breakfast. I had just settled down to check the car when it happened. Someone knocked on my door. My first thought was to ignore it, hoping they would go away, but the knocking only intensified. Then it got worse. "Gary, I know you're there," she said. Her voice was familiar, but I couldn't remember her name. She obviously knew me because she used my name. I took a deep breath, hoping that I could quickly shake it off and get back to my relaxing Sunday. I opened the door to see one of the last people in the world I expected to see standing on my porch. "What?" I asked angrily. "Oh, God," she said. "You look much better than I expected. You pulled yourself up, and short hair suits you." She walked past me and entered my living room without being invited. As she walked by, I couldn't help but notice how good she smelled. She walked over to my couch and took off her coat, placing it on the sofa next to her. She was a very feminine woman, some would call her girlish. Her waves of thick red hair were mixed with a few strands of gray that she had decided not to dye. This view made me think of fire and ice. Her hair was very similar to her personality. She had always been a very passionate and emotional woman, but if you made her angry or threatened someone she loved, her warmth disappeared. "Last time I saw you, you didn't even have a street fish for me," she said, despite the fact that her husband was my best friend for life. This time, she wore a thick wool sweater over a t-shirt. I was sure there was some kind of industrial bra underneath that was holding her large breasts in place. She was only wearing leggings and sneakers on her lower body. She looked like she had just come from some kind of fitness class and had simply thrown on a warm coat. This look suited her very well. As she stood looking around my living room, I noticed her body. Short but well-shaped legs tapered upward to wide hips and an absolutely incredible backside. Her belly was a little full, but for a woman her age who had already given birth, that was to be expected. This doesn't mean she had rolls of fat or a beer belly, she just wasn't in that fitness model category anymore. She suddenly turned around and caught me looking at her. I truly believe that trying to see if I would ogle her body was the main reason she was looking at the pictures scattered around my living room. "No family photos," she said. "No family," I answered angrily. Her face showed many emotions as she watched me. "Gary, you have two," she began. "No, I don't have any," I blurted out. "They were taken in the divorce." "Nonsense," I said. This curse sounded strange from her beautiful lips. Her slight southern accent drew out every syllable. "They cried to them just as they cried to me. Nobody knew there was a problem until it was over, and by that time, your children did not know how to cope with the situation. You made your position clear from the very beginning. They were either on her side or on yours, and you, by refusing to take calls and sending back all their letters and even Christmas cards unopened, made it very clear that you were not going to change your mind. They really miss you," she said. "What do you expect from them?" I asked. "They can't just throw her out on the street, and you probably don't know it." And maybe you don't care that she has a lot of health problems right now, I said, looking straight at her. Gary, you two have been together for over 20 years, she said. Isn't there any hope that you would at least try to treat each other civilly? Not at all, I blurted out. Oh, okay, she said. Looks like I'm about to lose a friend. You lost me as a friend a long time ago, I said. When you took her side in our divorce, you gave me your icy royal treatment quite thoroughly. Even after you single-handedly helped me get through John's death, she finished for me. She wiped her eyes. The fact that she could still shed a tear for him 6 years after his death reaffirmed my attraction to her. It was clear that when she loved someone, she did it with all her heart. If only I were as blessed to marry someone like her. What did you expect? She asked. She was my best friend, and Gary, she suffered. She was so upset. Everyone who looked at her, everyone who heard her plaintive cry, like that of an animal, could feel her pain. She cried as if her heart had been torn out of her chest while it was still beating. All I wanted was to help my best friend through this pain. She looked at me and shook her head. And you, she said, so strong. Even then, you didn't shed a single tear. It was like you just didn't care. You went about your business as if none of it mattered. She turned and looked me in the face. Her gaze pierced me as if she was trying to see the soul inside the body. And now, she said, you sit there like a huge cat, weighing all your options and trying to figure out what the hell I want. And once you determine my motives, you will cut me off and go on about your business as if I were never here. So why not save me the trouble and just tell me what this is all about? The point is, I want what you've never given anyone, she said. And then I'll ask what I came here for. I looked across the room at her. What have I never given to anyone? I asked. The real reason you rejected Charity after 20 years of marriage. I want to know why you suddenly decided that you no longer love the mother of your children and prefer to live alone. I have my guesses, but I need to know your side, she said. Why? I asked. After all this time, why does it matter? Because John loved you, Gary, she said. And me too. And what you did is just not like you. And all this time, Charity made everyone believe that what happened between you two had nothing to do with her actions. But her behavior makes me think that maybe she hasn't told us the whole truth. I laughed, and she looked at me from across the room. The expression on her face was unreadable. It's been 3 years, I said. Why do you suddenly want to hear my side? Perhaps my voice betrayed some of the anger I was feeling. Perhaps she was simply more perceptive than I gave her credit for. But I could tell from her face that she really wanted to know. I think maybe she's starting to see the truth, she said. She never gave up hope that you would get back together. But every time she fell into one of those depressions that plagued her, she changed the reason you broke up. At first, she wanted everyone to believe that it was because of you. She always claimed that it hurt her too much to talk about it. Then later, she boiled it down to you two just growing apart. But every time she talked about you, she talked about how much she missed you. Last week, I asked her if she wanted to sign up to work at a homeless shelter for Thanksgiving. We've always done this charity work there on holidays, but she was always too busy with you and the children. But since I was alone, I was free. Her voice trembled slightly as she talked about being alone. I knew that the only reason she was alone was because she hadn't decided if she needed a boyfriend. There's more to her life than her memories, she continued. She panicked when I asked her about it. She said her volunteer work cost her your marriage, and this has really been bothering me lately. I think what she said just doesn't sound like the Gary I know. Honestly, you've been on my mind a lot lately. I sighed and moved over to her. I lit logs in the fireplace, and the room filled with warmth. Hope tucked her legs under her, making herself more comfortable. I went to the kitchen, had a beer, and poured a glass of wine. I handed the glass to Hope and began my story. You already know how Charity and I met and got married, so I won't bore you with it. You already know how we raised our children in the house right across the street from you. You also know that your husband, John, and I have been lifelong friends, so it seemed natural that we would all be friends. So you and Charity did a lot of things together, so let's not waste time discussing the beginning or end of my marriage. Let's focus on how Charity's charity has torn us apart. About 5 years ago, right after John died, I received another promotion. I became vice president of the engineering department. Anyway, I was making so much money that we were suddenly able to buy some things we always wanted. I traded in my 2004 Mustang for a brand new 29 Shell GT500. I bought that gorgeous little Cadillac for charity and gave our kids a nice chunk of money too. We also decided that Charity really didn't need to work harder. At first, it seemed like a good idea for Charity to stay home, but over time, she became bored. She was thinking about going back to work, but she really didn't want the daily grind. She had also talked for years about wanting to do something to give back to the community for all the blessings she had received, and so she started volunteering. At first, it seemed like a good thing. She came home with lots of good stories about people she had helped. Helping people seemed like a tonic for her, and I have to say, it fueled the fire in our bedroom. Our nightlife was never bad, but after a day of handing out coats to the homeless or reading to the elderly, Charity was hotter than a $2 gun. I noticed Hope shaking her head at this. I decided to ask her later what was bothering her. During the holiday season, I continued, Charity got excited. It was as if she thought she could single-handedly end hunger and homelessness. She didn't infringe on our family, though. She made our Thanksgiving and Christmas dinners and gatherings as special as she could. But it seemed like she spent a lot more time with her volunteer work. She seemed obsessed with it. She went so far as to take our children to a center that provided clothes to the homeless. They spent the afternoon hanging and sorting clothes in the huge laundry room. They helped wash all the clothes that were donated. They returned home exhausted. But then, our children were somewhat spoiled. They never washed or ironed their clothes growing up, let alone washing clothes for thousands of people. This experience did little to make our children feel sympathy for the homeless, but it also gave them a new respect for what their mother was going through. They talked about how they were young and about 20 years old. So, if they were tired when they came home, then their mother must have been on the verge of physical exhaustion. This made me think about it too. I told Charity that if she was too tired for intim or anything else, she should just tell me, I said. She looked at me as if I had fallen from the tree of stupidity. Gary, you come first to me, honey, she said. My charity work is my hobby, but you are my life. I still remember her telling me that. At that moment, I was sure that she was telling the truth. We've been married for so long, and in all this time, she never once gave me a reason not to trust her. And in the end, I later found out that she was telling me the truth, literally. Wait a minute, Hope said. If she loved you so much, why the hell did you leave her? Can I continue the story? Hope, I said, can you come here and sit on the couch next to me while you talk? We're still friends, after all. Slowly, I approached her. I didn't want to get too close because, for a woman our age, Hope is quite attractive. I hadn't felt anything like this in a long time, and her presence reminded me of things I hadn't felt in a long time. Anyway, I continued, Charity exhausted herself. I felt terrible about this. I talked to the kids about it. We tried to figure out how to help her in any way. So, if you remember, we decided to have Thanksgiving dinner at my daughter Lisa's house. Lisa really liked it. This was Lisa's chance to be queen for the day, but Charity was a little sad about it. Though I thought she wanted to prove to everyone that she could handle anything and be in control, she burned the candle at both ends and went to exhaustion. I've seen this before. A person works so hard that he becomes blind to the fact that he is falling apart. One of the first signs is when they start to forget things. As I spoke, I began to notice Hope approaching me. The couch wasn't that big, so she was close enough to me that our legs were touching. The glow of the fire and the proximity did not do me any good. Keep going, she said, reaching out and patting me on the shoulder. As I began to speak again, I noticed that the hand she had placed on my shoulder did not move. Okay, for some reason, Charity was more concerned about our intimate life than I was, I said. Gary, she interrupted. She should be. Hope used this opportunity to move even closer to me. Charity loves you, she said. She knew she had to make you happy or you'd leave for another woman. No, I wouldn't leave, I said. I've been with Charity through thick and thin. How do you know she was worried about your nightlife? She asked. Do you remember how I told you that she was always ready for intim after volunteering, but then lately she started being too tired for night or anything when she came home? I asked. Well, she quickly changed her behavior. She started having an intimate with me before she went to the homeless shelter that Thanksgiving. The plan was for her to go to the shelter to help prepare their holiday dinner and then return home so we could go to Lisa's house for our own dinner. The wonderful feeling of a wonderful morning with my wife didn't last very long before the alarm went off, ruining it. What did you set the alarm for? I asked. I need to be at the shelter by 10, she reminded me. Come on, get up. You can do me in the shower. I don't think I can move anymore, I breathed. I'll just lie here and remember what you just did to me. I'll just enjoy this afterglow alone until I go for a run, but I will run very slowly. You took all my energy. She just laughed at me and waved her bare butt as she walked to the bathroom. I can't believe you're going to leave the warmth of your bed with the man who loves you to go serve soup to other people, I complained. Stay in bed with me. I'll only be at the shelter for a couple of hours, she said. Then we can both rest at Lisa's. I won't have to do anything tedious at the shelter, so we will have a lot of time to recover. I lay in bed thinking about how lucky I was and fell asleep. I woke up some time later and vaguely remembered Charity kissing me goodbye before leaving. I was sleeping so soundly that I probably wouldn't have felt or remembered that tender kiss if Charity hadn't dropped her glasses when she leaned in to kiss me. I stood up and stretched. I weighed the pros and cons of showering before heading out for a run. I smelled terrible. I was still thinking about it when I walked into the kitchen. There, on the countertop, were 2 chocolate cakes. There was supposed to be only one. Charity baked 2 cakes. We had to take one of them with us to Lisa's. The other cake Charity had to take with her to the shelter. It was another one of those little things that slipped her mind, reminding me that maybe she was working too hard, or maybe it was just her memory that was weak. At that moment, there was nothing I would not do for her, so I quickly jumped into the shower and then got dressed. Even though it was Thanksgiving, I decided to drive my Mustang. I felt invulnerable and needed a car to match that feeling. I had to go into the garage and unplug the car from the charger. It took me about 15 minutes to put the wheels back on it. Then I had to get a jack and lift the car off the jack stands. I knew I'd have to do it again when I got the car back, but the weather was nice, and it was worth it. I carefully placed the cake next to me on the passenger seat. Knowing Charity as I did, I knew she would be angry if the cake moved in the cake dish and the sides scratched the frosting. Since it was a holiday, the roads were almost empty. I got to the shelter very quickly. When I arrived, I was hesitant to leave my car in this parking lot, but I figured I would only be there for a few minutes. I imagined that I would come in, give Charity the cake, receive a big kiss in gratitude, then jump back on my iron horse and ride home, savior of the day. I know it sounds corny, but I was still floating on the wings of love. Great night does that to a guy. I don't know what I expected, but that's not what I got. First of all, I could barely get inside. There were so many people that most of them were standing. I guess because everything was going well for us, I forgot that there are a huge number of people out there with no job and no prospects of finding a job. As I looked at this sea of faces, white, black, Hispanic, and others, I saw the same depressed and desperate look. That look of absolute despair would tell any sane person more than anything else that we are all far more alike than we are different. For me, Thanksgiving was just another holiday that I took for granted. My biggest problems were deciding which of all the things my wife and daughter were preparing for a big dinner I wanted to eat, and what to watch on TV while they cooked. These people had a completely different set of problems. They were more concerned about finding a safe place to sleep and whether they would even be able to eat that day. I was ashamed to think that my Mustang, in its heated garage, was living better than most of the people in this room. I was paying a ridiculous amount of money for high-performance, full synthetic motor oil for my car, when most of these people could live over a month on what I was paying for an oil change. It was a sobering moment as I made my way among the people with a huge chocolate cake, which seemed ridiculous considering that the money spent on the ingredients for the cake could pay for healthy food for more people than those who would get a slice. But most people looked at the cake as if it were a gift from the gods. The woman in the apron smiled at me as I made my way to her. I lifted the cake to protect it, not from the humans. They seemed to be in pretty good spirits considering the circumstances, but because there were so many of them jammed together in the room that I didn't want to crush anyone trying to get through to the woman at the counter. After a few minutes of apologizing and fighting my way to her, I finally got close enough to talk. "Hello," she said. "Have you come to help?" "Sorry, not this time," I said. "Charity forgot the cake she baked. I brought it." "Oh my God," she laughed. "You must be Gary. No wonder she's always in such a hurry to get home to you." I blushed a little at the unexpected praise. "Charity is upstairs," she smiled. "She runs some kind of rewards program for some of our regular customers, one of those stimulating things. If they complete their building duties, they receive a star. If they go to a job interview, they get a star. If they get a job, they get 3 stars, and at the end of the month, they can choose a prize or something like that. I'm guessing the cake you're holding is probably one of the prizes." "Wow," I said. "I had no idea. Your wife is one of our best motivators." Enthusiastically, the woman said, "She can get guys to do almost anything. She has the same effect on me." I smiled. "Go to those stairs on the left," she said, before turning back to the huge salad she was preparing. "Happy Thanksgiving," I said. She smiled and nodded. It took me even longer to reach the stairs, holding the cake at arm's length to protect it. Among the tightly packed people in the building were several children. They looked at the cake the way a shark looks at a school of fish. When I finally reached the stairs, the crowd had thinned considerably. When I reached the floor above, I noticed several men standing near a closed door at the end of the corridor. They were dressed in warm, clean, but clearly not new clothes, which did not fit together. I tried to be friendly as I approached them. "Hi guys, happy Thanksgiving. Do you know where Charity is?" I asked. "She's in there," said one, "but you'll have to wait your turn." "Crap," the other swore. "He brought her a damn cake, he'll definitely get in." I smiled, thinking that they didn't realize that the cake I brought was the prize that Charity was going to give to all of them. I also wondered what Charity would do when she realized she forgot the cake. Knowing her, she would have called me and asked me to bring it anyway, so I was just saving time. I opened the door, and my world as I knew it ended. I stopped talking, and Hope looked at me. "Gary, are you okay?" she asked. There was concern in her voice as we talked. Slowly, she approached me, briefly moving away to take a sip of my beer. "Have a little," she said, pressing a cold bottle of Dos Equis to my lips. "Gary, I've never seen you so upset," she said. "Hope, I can't talk about this," I barely managed to say. "Maybe you should leave, Gary." "We don't have to talk about anything you don't want to," she said. "That's not why I'm here. I just wanted to ask about the divorce." She suddenly stopped, then continued, "Because I care, Gary. I love John and our son with all my heart. When the plane crashed, I felt like I died with them. I felt lost, experiencing a level of sadness that I thought I would never recover from. But I never felt alone, because you were always there. You were everything. You were a shoulder to cry on. You took care of all the details of the funeral and 1,000 other little things that I just couldn't focus on. Gary, you even paid my bills until the insurance company stopped stalling and wrote me a check. When I was able to function again, you still didn't stop. Instead of allowing me to become another lost and lonely woman, I became an aunt to your children and a member of your family. Gary, you never let me feel alone. But that's what we all did to you. I'm really sorry for that, Gary. 6 years is a long time, and when my heart healed enough to think about letting someone in, I cried. It was as if fate had chosen me as its cosmic litter. First, she took my husband and my son. Then, when I recovered enough to find love again, the only man I liked was married to my best friend. So for a couple of years, I just hid my feelings for you. But after the divorce, I knew I had to give both you and Charity time to recover from it all. I was shocked by her words. Hearing that Hope wanted me seemed impossible. The problem, as usual, is my friendship with Charity, Gary, she said. I knew that if anything happened between us, Charity would be devastated. She's already prone to depression. She always tells me and your children that she's ready to take you back, but you don't even want to talk to her. The last thing she said was that you don't need to apologize to her at all, she just wants you back. Tomorrow, your daughter Lisa will invite you to dinner at her home. The plan is for her to tell you that Charity won't be there. She really thinks that if she can get you two together to talk, you can work things out. It's been 3 years since you got divorced, Gary. You have a granddaughter whom you've never seen. I was at the hospital the day she was born and saw her every day until they took her home, I said. You seem to be forgetting that Noah, in addition to being our family doctor, is also the guy I grew up with. Of course, he arranged for me to see my granddaughter. She smiled at me. So, you came to warn me that my own daughter would try to trick me into going to Thanksgiving dinner with her mother? I asked. I only came to let you know all the facts. She pressed herself against me again, and this time, she hugged me openly. What if I just don't want to go? I asked. Then maybe I should go get a turkey, she said, and we'll just have dinner here. What do you mean, we? I asked. Now that we both know we're interested in each other, it'll be pretty hard to get rid of me, she chuckled. I saw the way you looked at me in my gym clothes. You looked at me the same way you said those kids looked at Charity's cake, she continued. I tensed up when she said that. Sorry, honey, she said. I didn't mean to bring up all of this. She leaned over and kissed me on the cheek, then closer to my lips, and then our lips met in a symphony of passion, desire, and longing. This was something that was long overdue. Wait, Hope, I said, before we start something that could change everything, you need to know what happened. She put her fingers on my lips. Darling, I already know everything, or at least I pieced it all together from what Charity told me, what the children told me, and now from you. I think I understand everything. That's almost what Lisa and I thought, but from what you told me today, it really added to my perspective on this. Now that I know how you felt about you and Charity, I understand why you acted the way you did, although I still don't understand why you didn't just let her go. I never thought of you as a selfish person, Gary, but I see that you and I are more alike than I thought. I guess I'm just like you, a one-woman man, and I'm going to expect you to put us first, okay, Hope? What do you think? I asked. She kissed me again, rolling us over so we were spooning in front of the fireplace. As she spoke, she began to rub her back against my stomach. As everyone always knew, you and Charity loved each other very much, she began. You were together for a long time, but you still had a spark. On the last day you were together, everything went wrong, Gary. The way you described your nightlife with Charity was the key. It was what you liked, what turned you on, and made your love for her more real and physical. Charity loved you very much too, but she saw your intimate life differently. For her, giving you night was something she did to make sure everything went well between you two. I think she saw it as just another marital responsibility, like cooking or cleaning. In your mind, intim was a way for both of you to connect your souls. In her mind, it was another way to be a good wife. For Charity, her husband was a provider, protector, and partner. You had a great career, kept her and your children safe, and made her happy, so she felt she had to do her part. She became adept at cooking, cleaning, and having intimate. Over time, you grew a little further apart. Your focus was on your career, and of course, that car. Her attention was always on you and the children. When the children grew up and left home, Charity needed a life outside the home. That's when she started volunteering. Charity threw herself into her volunteer work. I think we all noticed she started to miss little things. When you mentioned that she was sometimes too tired for night, she started having an intimate with you before going to volunteer. Everything came to a head on Thanksgiving Day. You were floating on cloud 9 that morning after some really good night, feeling your love for her come into focus again. Then you went to the homeless shelter and noticed how important her job was to her and how she adjusted her schedule to make time for it. Suddenly, you realized that she had an intimate with you before going there, not for the sake of your connection, but just to get it out of the way so she could volunteer. You poured your heart out to her and realized that it didn't really matter to her. In a fit of jealousy and pain, you caused a scene at the shelter and left her there. You went to Lisa's house as planned and spent Thanksgiving with your kids. You tried to hold on, but they could tell something was wrong, Gary. You and Charity were never apart from each other, and when she showed up a few hours later, after going home to try to find you, they saw how angry you were with her. You walked away and didn't let anyone talk to you or calm you down. You told her not to come home. Everyone thought you just needed to cool down. A few days later, you filed for divorce, and since everyone only heard Charity's version, they sided with her. But honestly, Gary, you never showed any emotion. Nobody knew how you felt. Everyone only saw their mother crying and becoming depressed. You didn't shed a single tear. What were we supposed to think? Your reluctance to let her help people really paints you as quite selfish, she said, raising the corners of her expressive mouth. I hope you learned your lesson. I'm glad you're not a detective, because you don't have much of a clue about what happened, I said angrily. All the evidence was in front of you, but it's like someone gave you a motorcycle kit and you threw out all the parts you didn't like and built a bike out of them. She rolled until we were face to face but didn't move away. Up close, I noticed how unnaturally green her eyes were. Her milky skin was strewn with a million tiny freckles on her cheeks. Our rolling around on the sofa had erased some of her light makeup, exposing them. The grin disappeared from her smile, and her face was so close to mine that it seemed as if our lips were attracted to each other like magnets. I wanted to kiss her so badly, but more than anything, I needed to tell her. When I opened the door, I didn't find a woman passionate about volunteer work, I said quietly. I found a woman who was enthusiastically having intim with a homeless man. Apparently, Charity's charity begins at home and ends at a homeless shelter. I stopped, but only for a second to collect my thoughts. Hope didn't say anything, but she hugged me tighter. Charity and I weren't Puritans, Hope. We always had a good night life. But after what I saw, I never wanted to see anyone have an intim again. It was surreal. I've told you before, being so in love with her, I saw her, despite her shortcomings, as the prettiest woman in the world. I remember, honey, Hope encouraged me to continue. It's funny because for most of my life, I believed that old story that you can't just stop loving someone. They always say that if you really love someone, you can't turn the feeling on or off. But I'm getting off topic. I think I've always seen Charity through the lens of love. But standing there, holding that damn cake in one hand, watching that guy have a night with Charity, I lost every ounce of love I'd ever felt for her. I have an iPhone, Hope, but getting it was the last thing on my mind. The only thing in my head was confusion. My brain just couldn't process what it was seeing. It was trying to create synaptic connections for a logical conclusion that somehow made sense, but there were no connections to create. My brain kept telling me that Charity was my wife, I loved her, and she loved me. Then my eyes showed me the scene in front of me. These two thoughts didn't go together. My brain couldn't find any reason for this. I was the only man who had an intimate with Charity. I already did this morning. It didn't make any sense. There were no synaptic connections to create. Trying to create one would probably damage my mind. So, to save itself, it banished all unproven information. I think I felt it happen. It was as if something in my brain literally snapped as my mental circuit breaker went off. And what I lost was not the vision before me. My eyes were telling me that what I was seeing was 100% real, this was undeniable. So, I lost unproven information. I lost faith that Charity ever loved me. I also lost my love for her. This happened, contrary to all guesses, instantly. Nature abhors a vacuum, and since my synapses couldn't form a connection, my brain needed something to fill that space. It filled it with anger. All this happened in just a moment. The guy having a night with Charity looked over his shoulder and shouted, "Hey, you! Close the door. It's not your turn yet. I've already used it." I blurted through clenched teeth. He must have sensed something in my tone because he turned his head to look at me. "This is a big cake," he muttered dully. "Can I have a piece?" "Why not?" I chuckled. I removed the clear lid from the cake. "You've already had a taste of my wife." I hit him in the face with the cake so hard that his neck twisted. He fell onto the table, dropping Charity. The guy was much bigger than me and probably, under normal circumstances, much stronger. But he didn't eat well. He was caught in a difficult situation. Well, screams still had an effect. They brought a lot of people from downstairs to join us. 3 men took me off him. They quickly pulled me away. The last thing I saw as they pulled me out the door was the woman I had spoken to earlier. She was in shock as she looked at Charity lying on the floor. I guess I was lucky that the people who took me off that idiot treated me the way they usually treat a fight between people at a homeless shelter. They dragged me up the stairs and threw me off the porch, telling me never to come back. I had no intention of doing so. Like you said, I didn't want to go home. I was sure that this would be the first place Charity would go as soon as she came to her senses. Like most injured animals, I needed safety and family around me. So I went to Lisa's. While we were watching football, they kept asking me where Charity was. I think I held it together pretty well until she showed up. I talked to my daughter and daughter-in-law. I also watched most of the game with my son and son-in-law. The house was full of love until Charity burst into the house, sobbing and trying to hug me. I pushed her away from me as hard as I could. Charity flew backward across the couch and onto the floor. All our kids looked at me as if I were crazy. "Just stay away from me, Charity," I shouted. "Don't come home. You can send Lisa tomorrow to pick up your things and whatever you need. Do not call me. Do not come to me." They decided I just needed to cool off. But then they didn't know what happened between us. And you didn't know either. And it looks like Charity never told any of you. She just let everyone think I was the bad guy and that I threw her away like trash. I don't think anyone noticed that there was no other woman, and no one even asked for my version of events, so I felt like you all made your choice and you all chose Charity over me. Are you crazy? Hope asked, concern in her voice. Darling, I was as angry as a bear. There were so many times when I called you and just didn't know what to say, so I hung up. When you answered, my number is hidden, so it doesn't show anything on caller ID. I called you on every holiday and your birthday. Even when you answered the phone, you sounded so angry that I just decided it wasn't a good time. Last week was the first time you actually sounded human. As for your children, she continued, they still can't get over the fact that they saw you push their mother over the sofa and scream at her. Charity never gave anyone a hint about what really happened. I myself am still recovering from shock. How could she do this and play the role of a martyr to the end? You should have been there a few months after the divorce when she announced that because you were so upset about her volunteer work, she would give it up in an attempt to win you back. She tried to get Lisa to call you and tell you about it, but I'm sure you remember how that call went. As soon as Lisa mentioned her mother, you hung up. She never gave it up, did she? After they caught her cheating that Thanksgiving, she was fired, and rumors spread to the point that she was not allowed to volunteer anywhere else. She deceived us all. We were also quite upset that you insisted on selling the old house. It was tearing Charity apart. She took out loans and even forced all of us to help her buy out your share. This house held so many memories for all of us, but I can understand how even the thought of it must have tormented you. God, we should have known better. We should have asked. Suddenly, she stopped talking. The magnetism between us intensified, and in the end, magnetism won. Our lips touched tenderly in the best kiss I had ever experienced. The kiss was so tender, it was as if someone had just melted fresh strawberries on my lips and sprinkled them with something so sweet it surpassed description. She smelled exactly like I always thought she would smell. When we pulled away, she sighed and blushed sincerely. Her cheeks were so pink they stood out against her milky skin. That was the best kiss ever, she exclaimed, standing up and beginning to gather her clothes. Hope, where are you going? I asked, irritation in my voice. Stop whining, darling, she chuckled. After this kiss, dynamite will not separate us. Have a little faith. I already told you that Charity would hate it if you and I talked. She'd go crazy if she thought you and I were together, so she constantly talks about you. She and I can never be friends again. So where are you going? I asked again. Since we're going to be alone for Thanksgiving, I need to buy the turkey, ingredients for the side dishes. She smiled at me, doing a little laundry. She winked at me again. I was beginning to realize that redheads have a very unique sense of humor. And then she continued, I need to break up with my best friend. As she picked up her jacket and headed for the door, she noticed that I could see how her ass just swayed when she walked. I saw her grin again, and she rocked it even more as she put on her jacket. I think I'll need a key, she said, and then she left. She returned a few hours later. Much of her self-confidence was gone. I saw Charity, she said quietly. I told her I talked to you. At first, she was happy. She asked me when I could get you together. She was so excited. We were at Lisa's house. How are you doing? She said. I was the best friend in the world. I then told her that we had talked and that I knew why you divorced her. She asked Lisa to leave, but Lisa stayed. Charity told me I didn't understand, she said. You don't understand. And that she was never given a chance to explain it. She said you had a job and your car to feel fulfilled, and she had nothing. Her work with the poor and homeless gave her purpose, but she wanted to give them more than just food or clothing. She wanted to give them the motivation to take control of their lives. Instead, you gave them to them. She snorted, and it forced them to go out and go to interviews and try to make something of themselves. No harm done. What about Gary? I asked. Are you going to tell me that the moment he caught you with some guy, didn't turn him inside out, and then you let everyone think he was just being selfish? He loved you more than anything in the world. He came to the shelter to help you. You even allowed his children to think it was entirely his fault. I'll make it right, Hope, she said. Now that you've reached him, I can talk to him. I can make him see things as they are, and we can all be happy again. Mom, is this true? Asked Lisa. Did you really do this? Have you cheated on your dad? Lisa, don't interfere. Charity snorted. Go to your room, Mom. I'm 24 years old, said Lisa. This is my room, this is my kitchen, in fact, this is my home. So answer the question. Listen, as soon as I talk to your father, everything will be fine, Charity lamented. Your father simply overreacted. He loves me too much. It's always about you, isn't it, Mom? Lisa cried. My father missed the birth of his first granddaughter because you had to help the homeless. How can he ever make this up? Actually, he was there, I said. Lisa smiled. So when Hope gets me and your dad back together, he can talk to her and catch up, Charity said. That's not actually going to happen, I said. He's suffered enough, and finally, he's happy with someone else. I think my happiness was noticeable. Lisa didn't react or acknowledge anything except Charity. It's you, she suddenly screamed. You're not taking my husband. And that's how I lost my best friend, she said. I hugged her and pulled her towards me. Sorry, I said, you'll have to take her place. The next few days were sweet. I took the week off for Thanksgiving, and Hope isn't working. We spent most of Monday and Tuesday moving some of her things to my house. Everything seemed to come together so quickly, but by the time you get to our age, you have an idea of what will work and what won't. Our days were filled with learning about each other, but to be honest, we had known each other for over 20 years. We learned most of the information about each other at night, and we went to bed quite early and stayed there quite late. We had a lot in common, including the fact that we were both passionate about sports. She had yoga classes and spin classes. I had weights and ran. Thursday morning came, and we woke up as usual, in each other's arms. I know things are happening very quickly, I said, but I want you to know that I love you, Hope. I think everything is going well, she grinned. But I love you too. Now, are you done pestering me for a little while so I can cook us a turkey, H? I don't think I'll ever stop pestering you, I said. It was the best Thanksgiving I remember. We did everything together the way it should have been. None of us wanted to be anywhere else. I was happy where I was and believed that Hope's charity began and stayed home. Just before I checked the turkey during a commercial for the Lions vs. Bears Thanksgiving game, someone knocked on my door. Hope, open the door, I screamed. I'm busy, she shouted back. I went into the living room. You don't look busy to me, I said. Hope sat on the couch and waited for me to return. She managed to button her blouse again, which confused me. I have no idea why you're buttoning your blouse, I smirked. I'm going to unbutton it one more time, she said, putting her fingers to my lips to silence me. Why are you shushing me? I grinned. Probably so your grandson won't hear what you were about to say, said a voice behind me. I turned around and found my daughter Lisa standing behind me. In one hand, she held the hand of her 2-year-old daughter, the other was holding some kind of dish. "Hi, Daddy," she whispered. "I just had to come and see you. You shouldn't be alone on Thanksgiving." I held out my hands, and she collided with them. I hugged her as tightly as I could and then fell to my knees to hug my granddaughter. Lisa and I talked while I played with Greta. However, soon someone else knocked on the door. "Damn it," Hope said. "It's like being at a train station." "Oh, sorry, Greta." She opened the door, and my sister-in-law Kelly walked in. She also carried a dish. "At the game, huh, Tony," she said. "What are you doing here, cutie?" asked Tony. "Well, I knew your dad always loved my pasta, tomato, and bacon casserole, and since he had to be alone." Hope started laughing with the pie Lisa brought, the mashed potatoes Hope had already made, and the pasta casserole Kelly brought. All we needed was a vegetable dish. The three women grouped together to discuss this while my granddaughter Greta climbed onto my lap. "I want to watch SpongeBob," she said, folding her arms across her chest and pulling out her sponge, just like a certain red-headed girl always did. "Tony, Steve," and I looked at Hope. I took the remote control and changed the channel. "Dad, no!" Tony shouted. "It's almost a break now. The Lions are actually winning, but they never win the game on Thanksgiving Day. I know they will lose. I just want to see how they can blow that lead," I said. I went and got my iPad. "Dad, you're a genius," Steve said. "She can watch SpongeBob on your iPad." "I want to watch SpongeBob on the big TV." Greta giggled. "Steve, are you sure this girl's hair won't turn red when she grows up?" I laughed. For the rest of the day, the three of us watched the game on my iPad while Greta watched cartoons on the TV that was larger than her bed. As her eyelids began to droop, Steve, my brother-in-law, and her father smiled. She stretched out on the couch, and Steve reached for the remote. Her eyes instantly flew open, and she took it back. Steve was unhappy. An hour later, after the game ended with the Lions somehow managing to win, we sat down to dinner. The turkey was great, and I had a lot to be grateful for. I had my children and their spouses. I had my beautiful and soon-to-be spoiled granddaughter, and most of all, I had a heart filled with hope again. After we prayed and started passing food, we heard a bell. Lisa took out her phone and answered. The voice was so loud and angry that even though the phone was not on speaker, we could hear it. "Where are you all? Where is everyone?" I dozed off, and the fire alarm woke me up. The damn turkey burned to the ground, and I'm alone on Thanksgiving Day. First, my so-called best friend stole my husband. Now my whole family left me alone for Thanksgiving. Lisa put the phone on the table and left it there. "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad," she said. "Pass me some pasta." We passed the food to each other and began to eat, ignoring Charity's scolding on the phone. Under the table, Hope took my hand. "Happy Thanksgiving, honey," she said. And this was indeed the case. For the first time in a long time, this really was the case. What do you think of our story today? In my opinion, the wife did the most wrong and unpleasant thing to her husband. What's your opinion? Write in the comments. Until new videos.